Plato, one of the greatest philosophers in Western history, was born around 427 BCE in Athens, a city renowned for its intellectual and cultural vibrancy. His birth name, Aristocles, was later overshadowed by the nickname Plato, derived from the Greek word Platos, meaning broad, possibly referencing his physical build or expansive mind. Plato's lineage was illustrious. He hailed from a noble Athenian family that traced its roots to the legendary King Codrus on his father's side and the reformist lawmaker Solon on his mother's side. This aristocratic heritage would deeply influence his views on politics and governance. The Athens of Plato's youth was both a beacon of democratic ideals and a stage for profound political turmoil. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta loomed over the city-state, shaking its foundations. This environment exposed Plato to the volatility of democracy, an experience that would later shape his philosophical critiques. Despite the chaos, Athens was also a hub of intellectual activity, home to poets, playwrights, and early philosophers. This fertile intellectual ground provided Plato with access to some of the best education of his time. Plato's early education was likely comprehensive, covering subjects such as music, gymnastics, and poetry, which were integral to Athenian schooling. He displayed an aptitude for learning and a natural curiosity that foreshadowed his future pursuits in philosophy. Influenced by the Homeric epics and the works of Hesiod, young Plato developed a deep appreciation for the power of language and storytelling, skills he would later employ masterfully in his philosophical dialogues. The socio-political climate of Athens also exposed Plato to the fragility of leadership and the dangers of moral corruption. His family was politically active. His uncle Critias became one of the 30 tyrants, a short-lived oligarchic regime imposed by Sparta. This connection placed Plato at the crossroads of Athenian politics, forcing him to grapple with questions about justice, power, and governance from an early age. A transformative moment in Plato's life came with his introduction to Socrates, a philosopher whose teachings would profoundly shape his intellectual development. Socrates, renowned for his method of questioning and his disdain for material wealth, became a mentor and a source of inspiration for the young Plato. Socrates' focus on ethics and the pursuit of truth resonated deeply with Plato, igniting his passion for philosophy and setting him on a path that would define his life. Plato's family, however, envisioned a different future for him. As a young man from an aristocratic family, Plato was expected to participate in public affairs and pursue a career in politics. Yet his observations of the Athenian political system, marred by corruption and demagoguery, left him disillusioned. The execution of Socrates in 399 BCE, orchestrated by the Athenian democracy Plato was meant to serve, marked a turning point. This tragic event cemented Plato's skepticism toward democratic governance and redirected his ambitions toward philosophy. The spiritual and intellectual crises of Plato's youth can be seen as the crucible in which his philosophical ideas were forged. Witnessing the fall of Athens' golden age and the moral failings of its leaders, he began to question the very foundations of human society. How could a city renowned for its wisdom and culture succumb to chaos and injustice? These questions drove him to seek answers beyond the realm of politics, delving into the abstract domains of ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology. Despite his early challenges, Plato's noble heritage and education positioned him uniquely to explore these philosophical questions. He combined the critical eye of a political insider with the idealism of a philosopher in search of higher truths. Unlike many of his contemporaries who sought immediate solutions to political problems, Plato looked deeper, probing the nature of justice, knowledge, and reality itself. Plato's upbringing also highlighted the tension between tradition and innovation. While his aristocratic lineage connected him to Athens' storied past, his philosophical inclinations propelled him toward uncharted intellectual territory. This duality, rooted in the old yet striving for the new, became a hallmark of his thought, manifesting in his dialogues and theories. In many ways, the story of Plato's early life is the story of Athens itself, a city torn between its glorious past and an uncertain future. The challenges and contradictions he faced during his formative years not only shaped his character, but also laid the groundwork for his contributions to philosophy. Plato's journey from a privileged Athenian youth to a seeker of eternal truths would make him one of the most enduring figures in the history of human thought. Plato's intellectual journey took a decisive turn when he encountered Socrates, the man who would profoundly influence his life and philosophical outlook. Socrates, a towering figure in Athenian intellectual circles, was known for his method of questioning, his disdain for material wealth, and his relentless pursuit of truth. Plato, already inclined toward philosophical inquiry, found in Socrates a mentor and a guide whose teachings would ignite his passion for wisdom and justice. This relationship marked the beginning of Plato's transformation from a promising young Athenian into a philosopher of enduring legacy. Socrates' method, often referred to as the Socratic method, involved a rigorous process of questioning to expose contradictions in his interlocutor's beliefs. This dialectical approach aimed not to provide ready-made answers, but to lead participants towards self-discovery and a clearer understanding of truth. For Plato, this method was revolutionary. It demonstrated that knowledge could not be attained through mere observation or rote memorization, but required active engagement and critical thinking. This approach would later become the backbone of Plato's own philosophical methodology. Plato's relationship with Socrates extended beyond the intellectual realm. Socrates' ascetic lifestyle, characterized by his indifference to wealth and physical comfort, left a deep impression on the young Plato. In a society that often valued status and material success, Socrates stood as a countercultural figure who prioritized moral integrity and intellectual honesty. This example inspired Plato to reject the superficial pursuits of Athenian society and dedicate himself to the higher ideals of philosophy. The intellectual bond between the two philosophers deepened as Plato became one of Socrates' closest disciples. Plato was not merely a passive observer. He actively engaged in Socratic dialogues, testing and refining his own ideas under the guidance of his mentor. Socrates' focus on ethical questions, such as the nature of justice, virtue, and the good life, resonated with Plato's growing disillusionment with the political and moral failures of Athens. These discussions would lay the foundation for many of Plato's later works. However, Socrates' unconventional views and his penchant for questioning authority earned him powerful enemies in Athens. In 399 BCE, he was accused of corrupting the youth and impiety, charges that many scholars believe were politically motivated. Despite his defense, Socrates was sentenced to death by hemlock. For Plato, the trial and execution of Socrates were not just a personal tragedy, but a profound indictment of Athenian democracy. The very system that claimed to uphold justice and reason had condemned one of its wisest citizens. The death of Socrates marked a turning point in Plato's life. It forced him to confront the limitations of the democratic system and deepened his skepticism toward the masses' ability to govern wisely. Plato came to believe that the pursuit of truth and justice could not be entrusted to a system susceptible to manipulation by demagogues and driven by popular opinion. This disillusionment with democracy would become a central theme in his philosophical writings, particularly in the Republic. Socrates' martyrdom also left Plato with the responsibility of preserving and advancing his mentor's legacy. Although Socrates left no written works, Plato ensured that his ideas would endure by immortalizing him in his dialogues. These texts, often written as conversations featuring Socrates as the central figure, not only captured the spirit of Socratic inquiry, but also served as a platform for Plato to develop and express his own philosophical ideas. Plato's grief over Socrates' death was accompanied by a renewed determination to seek truth and justice in a way that transcended the failings of Athens. He began to explore questions that Socrates had left unanswered, such as the nature of ultimate reality and the conditions necessary for a just society. While Socrates had focused on ethics and individual conduct, Plato expanded his inquiry to include metaphysics, epistemology, and political philosophy. Socrates' influence on Plato was not limited to ideas, but extended to his approach to life. Like his mentor, Plato adopted a life of intellectual rigor and moral discipline, distancing himself from the political ambitions that had once seemed inevitable given his aristocratic background. Socrates' example showed Plato that true fulfillment lay not in the pursuit of power or wealth, but in the relentless quest for wisdom and self-improvement. In the years following Socrates' death, Plato emerged as a philosopher in his own right, but his debt to his mentor was unmistakable. Socrates' teachings provided the foundation upon which Plato built his own philosophical edifice. The lessons he learned from Socrates about questioning assumptions, valuing truth, and seeking the greater good remained central to his thought and legacy. Socrates may have been gone, but his spirit lived on in Plato's works, ensuring that his ideas would continue to inspire generations of thinkers. Following the death of Socrates, Plato found himself at a crossroads. Disillusioned with the political turmoil of Athens and deeply affected by his mentor's execution, he chose to embark on a journey of intellectual discovery. This period of travel, which spanned approximately a decade, was a pivotal chapter in Plato's life. It exposed him to diverse philosophies, cultures, and ideas that would significantly shape his own philosophical outlook. Plato's first destination was likely Megara, where he sought refuge with Euclides, a fellow disciple of Socrates. Megara was known for its intellectual circles, particularly the Megarian school of philosophy, which focused on logic and dialectics. Here, Plato engaged in discussions that reinforced his commitment to Socratic inquiry while also broadening his exposure to philosophical methodologies. This experience demonstrated the importance of dialogue and debate in the pursuit of truth, principles that would underpin Plato's later writings. From Megara, Plato traveled to Italy and Sicily, where he encountered the Pythagoreans, a sect that blended mathematics, mysticism, and philosophy. The Pythagoreans' belief in the fundamental role of numbers in understanding the universe deeply resonated with Plato. Their emphasis on abstract forms and the harmony of the cosmos provided a foundation for his own metaphysical theories, particularly the theory of forms. Plato's fascination with the Pythagoreans' systematic approach to knowledge would later manifest in his exploration of ideal realities and universal truths. Plato's travels also brought him to Egypt, a land renowned for its ancient wisdom and advanced knowledge of science, mathematics, and religion. In Egypt, Plato observed the interplay between empirical knowledge and spiritual understanding. The Egyptian priesthood, guardians of sacred knowledge, demonstrated the integration of practical skills with philosophical inquiry. This holistic approach left an indelible mark on Plato, encouraging him to view philosophy as a discipline that bridges the material and the transcendent. During his time abroad, Plato also reflected on the political systems he encountered. The governance structures of various city-states and regions offered a stark contrast to the democratic volatility of Athens. These observations deepened his interest in political philosophy and fueled his quest to envision a just society. He began to see the need for a ruler guided by wisdom and reason, a concept that would later culminate in his idea of the philosopher king. Plato's travels were not merely physical, but also intellectual. He sought to synthesize the diverse ideas he encountered into a coherent philosophical framework. This eclectic approach set him apart from many of his contemporaries, who often adhered rigidly to a single school of thought. Plato's willingness to engage with different perspectives enriched his understanding of the world and provided a solid foundation for his later philosophical contributions. Despite the intellectual wealth he gained during his travels, Plato's journey was also marked by challenges. Engaging with opposing philosophies often forced him to reassess and refine his own beliefs. These encounters underscored the complexity of human knowledge and the limitations of any single perspective. Plato's intellectual humility, a trait he inherited from Socrates, allowed him to embrace these challenges as opportunities for growth. As Plato's travels drew to a close, he began to crystallize his philosophical vision. The lessons he learned abroad about the nature of reality, the role of reason, and the structure of society would become central themes in his writings. He returned to Athens with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to apply his knowledge to address the moral and intellectual crises of his time. Plato's decade-long search for knowledge was transformative. It enabled him to integrate the teachings of Socrates with insights from other philosophical traditions, creating a unique and comprehensive worldview. This synthesis of ideas would later become the hallmark of his philosophy, distinguishing him as a thinker who transcended the boundaries of his cultural and intellectual milieu. In many ways, Plato's journey was a microcosm of the philosophical endeavor itself. A relentless pursuit of truth that requires openness, adaptability, and a willingness to challenge one's assumptions. His travels not only shaped his understanding of the world, but also prepared him to become one of history's greatest philosophers. The seeds of his later works, the Republic, the Symposium, and the Phaedo, were sown during this formative period, ensuring that his ideas would resonate far beyond the boundaries of ancient Greece. Upon returning to Athens after his transformative travels, Plato faced a critical decision: how to preserve and expand the philosophical legacy of Socrates while addressing the intellectual and moral challenges of his time. The result of this deliberation was the founding of the Academy, an institution that would become one of the most influential centers of learning in Western history. Established around 387 BCE, the Academy was not merely a school, but a living embodiment of Plato's vision of philosophy as a pursuit of truth, wisdom, and the greater good. The Academy was named after the grove of Academus, a serene site on the outskirts of Athens, where Plato set up his school. Its tranquil surroundings symbolized the contemplative atmosphere Plato sought to cultivate. Unlike the bustling agora, where rhetoric and politics often overshadowed deeper inquiry, the Academy provided a space for focused intellectual engagement. Plato envisioned it as a sanctuary where students and scholars could dedicate themselves to the pursuit of knowledge without the distractions of public life. The curriculum at the Academy was as ambitious as it was diverse. Plato believed that a true philosopher needed a broad foundation in various disciplines, including mathematics, astronomy, music, ethics, and political theory. Mathematics held a special place in the Academy's program, reflecting the influence of Pythagorean thought. The famous inscription at the entrance of the Academy, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter," underscored Plato's conviction that mathematical reasoning was essential for understanding higher truths. Central to the Academy's pedagogy was the Socratic method of dialogue and questioning. Plato encouraged his students to engage in rigorous debates, challenging one another's assumptions and refining their ideas through dialectical reasoning. This interactive approach fostered critical thinking and intellectual humility, qualities that Plato deemed essential for both personal growth and societal progress. By emulating Socrates' method, Plato ensured that the spirit of his mentor lived on in the Academy's intellectual culture. The Academy was not limited to theoretical pursuits. It also sought to address practical questions about governance, ethics, and human behavior. Plato viewed philosophy as a guide to life, capable of informing decisions in both personal and public spheres. Many of his dialogues, written during this period, explored the interplay between abstract principles and real-world applications, demonstrating the relevance of philosophy to everyday challenges. One of the Academy's most significant contributions was its role in training future leaders and thinkers. Plato envisioned the institution as a breeding ground for philosopher kings, wise and virtuous rulers capable of guiding society toward justice and harmony. While the ideal of the philosopher king was never fully realized in practice, the Academy produced several prominent figures who left their mark on philosophy, science, and politics. Among its most famous alumni was Aristotle, whose intellectual achievements would rival even those of his teacher. The Academy also served as a hub for collaboration and the exchange of ideas. Scholars from across the Greek world and beyond came to study under Plato, bringing with them diverse perspectives and expertise. This cosmopolitan environment enriched the intellectual life of the Academy, fostering innovations in fields ranging from natural science to metaphysics. The synthesis of these varied insights contributed to the Academy's reputation as a beacon of knowledge and creativity. Despite its achievements, the Academy was not without challenges. Plato's ambitious vision occasionally clashed with the realities of human nature and the political climate of Athens. His idealism, while inspiring, sometimes proved difficult to translate into practice. The gap between philosophical ideals and societal norms remained a persistent tension in Plato's thought, as reflected in his later dialogues. Nevertheless, the Academy endured as a testament to Plato's unwavering commitment to philosophy. It operated continuously for nearly a millennium, influencing countless generations of scholars and laying the groundwork for the Western intellectual tradition. Its emphasis on reason, inquiry, and the search for universal truths became defining features of classical education and philosophy. In founding the Academy, Plato achieved more than the creation of a school. He established a model of intellectual life that continues to inspire. By dedicating his life to teaching and writing, he ensured that the questions he explored about justice, reality, and the good life would remain central to human thought. The Academy was not just a place of learning. It was a legacy, a living embodiment of Plato's belief in the transformative power of philosophy. Central to Plato's philosophy is the theory of forms, a groundbreaking concept that sought to explain the nature of reality, knowledge, and existence. This theory emerged as a response to the philosophical debates of his time, particularly the conflicting views of Heraclitus, who emphasized constant change, and Parmenides, who argued for the unchanging nature of reality. Plato reconciled these perspectives by proposing a dual-level reality: the world of appearances, which is transient and imperfect, and the world of forms, which is eternal and perfect. The theory of forms posits that the physical world we perceive with our senses is only a shadow or imitation of a higher, unchanging reality. According to Plato, true knowledge cannot be derived from sensory experience, as the objects of the physical world are in a state of constant flux. Instead, knowledge must concern itself with the forms, abstract, ideal entities that represent the true essence of things. For instance, while individual trees may vary in size, shape, and condition, they all partake in the form of tree, which embodies the perfect and unchanging essence of treeness. Plato's famous allegory of the cave, presented in the Republic, illustrates the relationship between the world of appearances and the world of forms. In the allegory, prisoners are chained inside a cave, perceiving only shadows cast on the wall by objects outside their view. The shadows represent the physical world, while the objects casting the shadows symbolize the forms. The journey of a prisoner who escapes the cave and comes to see the objects in the sunlight reflects the philosopher's ascent from ignorance to true knowledge of the forms. The forms, according to Plato, exist independently of the material world and are the ultimate source of all truth and reality. They are eternal, immutable, and accessible only through reason and intellect. This distinction between the sensory and the intellectual realms had profound implications for epistemology. Plato argued that knowledge of the forms is innate and can be recollected through philosophical inquiry, a process he described in the dialogue Meno. This idea of recollection, or anamnesis, suggests that the soul has encountered the forms in a prior, pre-embodied existence. Among the forms, Plato identified the form of the good as the highest and most important. The form of the good, akin to the sun in the allegory of the cave, illuminates and gives existence to all other forms. It is the ultimate source of truth, beauty, and moral excellence, and understanding it is the philosopher's ultimate goal. For Plato, the form of the good is not only an abstract concept but also the foundation of a just and harmonious society, as only those who grasp its nature can govern wisely. Plato's theory of forms also influenced his views on art and aesthetics. He was critical of artists and poets who, in his view, dealt with mere imitations of reality rather than the forms themselves. In the Republic, he argued that art, by appealing to emotions rather than reason, could mislead and corrupt the soul. This skepticism toward artistic representation reflected his broader concern with the distinction between appearance and reality. Critics of Plato's theory of forms, both ancient and modern, have questioned its coherence and practical applicability. Aristotle, Plato's most famous student, challenged the existence of a separate realm of forms, arguing instead for a more integrated understanding of universals and particulars. Despite these criticisms, the theory of forms remains one of Plato's most enduring contributions to philosophy, inspiring subsequent debates in metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. The theory of forms also has significant implications for education and the role of the philosopher. In Plato's view, the philosopher is uniquely equipped to transcend the illusions of the physical world and apprehend the forms. This understanding forms the basis of Plato's argument for the philosopher king in the Republic. Only those who have ascended to the realm of forms, and particularly the form of the good, are fit to rule, as they possess the wisdom necessary to govern justly and effectively. The dualistic nature of Plato's ontology, the division between the world of forms and the world of appearances, has shaped Western thought for centuries. It provided the foundation for subsequent philosophical and theological systems, including Neoplatonism and early Christian theology, which adapted Plato's ideas to their respective contexts. The enduring appeal of the theory of forms lies in its ambition to provide a comprehensive explanation of reality, one that bridges the gap between the empirical and the transcendent. Plato's theory of forms is not merely a metaphysical doctrine, but a framework for understanding human existence and the pursuit of truth. It challenges individuals to look beyond the surface of things, question their assumptions, and strive for a deeper understanding of the principles that underlie reality. By emphasizing the primacy of reason and the eternal nature of truth, the theory of forms has left an indelible mark on the intellectual landscape, cementing Plato's reputation as one of the greatest philosophers of all time. Plato's disillusionment with Athenian democracy, exacerbated by the trial and execution of Socrates, deeply influenced his views on governance and society. In his seminal work, The Republic, Plato articulated his vision of the ideal state, a society designed to promote justice, harmony, and the common good. This vision was not merely theoretical, but a response to the political instability and moral corruption that Plato observed in Athens and other Greek city-states. At the heart of Plato's political philosophy is the concept of justice, which he sought to define not only in individual terms, but also within the structure of society. Plato argued that justice in the state mirrors justice in the individual. Just as the individual soul consists of three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite, each with its specific role, the state is composed of three classes: rulers, auxiliaries, and producers. Justice arises when each part of the soul, or each class in the state, performs its proper function without interfering with the others. The ruling class, or philosopher kings, is central to Plato's ideal state. These rulers are individuals who have ascended to the realm of the forms and have achieved a profound understanding of the form of the good. Plato believed that only philosopher kings possess the wisdom, virtue, and impartiality necessary to govern justly. Unlike ordinary politicians, who are often swayed by personal interests and popular opinion, philosopher kings are guided by reason and a commitment to the common good. The second class, the auxiliaries, serves as the state's defenders and enforcers of its laws. Composed of warriors and guardians, this class embodies the spirited part of the soul, characterized by courage and discipline. The auxiliaries are responsible for maintaining order and protecting the state from internal and external threats. To ensure their loyalty and moral integrity, Plato proposed a strict system of education that instills virtues such as bravery, selflessness, and obedience to reason. The producers, the largest class, include farmers, artisans, and merchants. Their role is to sustain the state through their labor and material contributions. This class corresponds to the appetitive part of the soul, which seeks physical and material satisfaction. While Plato acknowledged the importance of the producers' work, he believed that their focus on personal gain made them unfit to rule or wield significant political power. Instead, they were to be governed by the wisdom of the philosopher kings and the protection of the auxiliaries. Plato's ideal state is highly hierarchical and collectivist, reflecting his belief that the common good takes precedence over individual freedoms. One of his most controversial proposals is the abolition of private property and the family for the ruling and auxiliary classes. Plato argued that these institutions create divisions and promote selfishness, undermining the unity and harmony of the state. By eliminating personal wealth and familial ties, Plato hoped to ensure that rulers and guardians would act solely in the interest of the community. Education plays a pivotal role in Plato's ideal state, serving as the primary means of cultivating virtue and wisdom. Plato envisioned a rigorous and lifelong system of education that begins in childhood and culminates in philosophical training for the most gifted individuals. This education is designed to identify potential philosopher kings who must undergo years of study in mathematics, dialectics, and metaphysics before assuming leadership roles. Plato's emphasis on education reflects his belief that ignorance is the root of social and political problems. Despite its idealism, Plato's vision of the state has been subject to significant criticism. Many have argued that his model is undemocratic and authoritarian, subordinating individual rights to the demands of the collective. Others have questioned the feasibility of his proposals, particularly the idea of philosopher kings, who may be vulnerable to corruption despite their training. Even Aristotle, Plato's most famous student, criticized aspects of the ideal state, particularly its communal arrangements and its neglect of practical governance. Nevertheless, the Republic remains one of the most influential works in the history of political thought. Its exploration of justice, power, and human nature has inspired countless philosophers, from Thomas More and Karl Marx to modern theorists grappling with questions of governance and equality. Plato's emphasis on the importance of virtue in leadership and his critique of unchecked democracy continue to resonate in contemporary debates about politics and society. Ultimately, Plato's ideal state is not merely a blueprint for governance, but a philosophical exercise in envisioning a just society. By emphasizing the role of reason, virtue, and education, Plato challenges readers to question the assumptions underlying their own political systems. Whether viewed as an unattainable utopia or a provocative critique, Plato's vision remains a testament to his enduring quest for justice and the betterment of humanity. Plato's philosophical contributions were not merely conveyed through systematic treatises or lectures, but were uniquely embedded in his dialogues, a literary form that remains unparalleled in its combination of philosophical rigor and artistic expression. The dialogues, numbering over 30, serve as both philosophical explorations and dramatic works, presenting timeless questions about truth, morality, knowledge, and the human condition. This method of inquiry, inspired by the conversational approach of Socrates, became the hallmark of Plato's writing and one of his most enduring legacies. Each dialogue is framed as a conversation, often led by Socrates, who questions his interlocutors about fundamental issues. Through this dialectical method, Plato sought not only to communicate ideas, but also to demonstrate the process of philosophical reasoning. This method reflects his belief that philosophy is not a static body of knowledge, but an active, ongoing quest for truth. The dialogues invite readers to engage with the arguments, question assumptions, and draw their own conclusions, embodying the Socratic ideal of critical inquiry. Plato's dialogues vary widely in tone, style, and complexity, ranging from early works closely aligned with the historical Socrates to later writings that delve into more abstract and systematic philosophical theories. The early dialogues, such as Euthyphro, Apology, and Crito, focus on ethical questions and often portray Socrates in his role as a gadfly, challenging the complacency of his fellow Athenians. These works capture the spirit of Socratic irony and highlight the tension between individual conscience and societal norms. The middle dialogues, including the Republic, Symposium, and Phaedo, mark a shift toward more elaborate philosophical doctrines, such as the theory of forms and the nature of the soul. In the Republic, for instance, Plato explores the concept of justice and constructs his vision of the ideal state, while Symposium examines the nature of love as a pathway to higher knowledge. These works reflect Plato's evolving thought and his ambition to address both theoretical and practical dimensions of philosophy. The later dialogues, such as Theaetetus, Sophist, and Timaeus, demonstrate a more complex and critical engagement with earlier ideas. Plato revisits and refines his theories, often questioning their implications and limitations. For example, in Parmenides, he subjects the theory of forms to a rigorous critique, revealing the philosophical challenges it poses. These dialogues reflect Plato's intellectual humility and his recognition of the provisional nature of philosophical inquiry. Beyond their philosophical content, Plato's dialogues are celebrated for their literary artistry. His vivid characterizations, dramatic settings, and eloquent prose elevate the dialogues beyond mere philosophical treatises, making them accessible and engaging to a wide audience. Plato's ability to weave complex arguments into compelling narratives has ensured the dialogue's enduring appeal, both as works of philosophy and as masterpieces of literature. A recurring theme in Plato's dialogues is the tension between appearance and reality, a motif that mirrors his metaphysical distinction between the world of forms and the physical world. This theme is particularly evident in the allegory of the cave, where Plato uses a powerful narrative to illustrate the philosopher's journey from ignorance to enlightenment. Such allegories and myths serve as pedagogical tools, bridging the gap between abstract concepts and the reader's experience. Plato's dialogues also reflect his awareness of the limitations of written philosophy. In Phaedrus, he expresses concern that writing can only serve as a reminder of knowledge, not a substitute for the active engagement of dialectical discussion. This paradox highlights the tension between Plato's commitment to the living exchange of ideas and his recognition of the written word's potential to preserve and disseminate philosophy. The dialogues, in this sense, are not definitive answers, but invitations to continue the philosophical conversation. The impact of Plato's dialogues on Western thought is incalculable. They became foundational texts for subsequent philosophical traditions, influencing figures such as Aristotle, Plotinus, Augustine, and Descartes. The dialogue's emphasis on reason, ethics, and the search for universal truths laid the groundwork for both classical and modern philosophy. Their literary form also inspired later writers, from Dante to Nietzsche, who saw in Plato a model of intellectual and artistic synthesis. Plato's dialogues are more than historical artifacts. They remain vibrant and relevant, addressing questions that continue to resonate in contemporary philosophy, politics, and ethics. By engaging readers in a dynamic and participatory manner, the dialogues ensure that Plato's voice is not confined to the past, but remains a living presence in the ongoing human endeavor to understand the world and our place within it. Plato's philosophy extends beyond the external world and the state, delving deeply into the inner realm of the human soul. His conception of the soul, as articulated across various dialogues, is central to his ethical, metaphysical, and epistemological theories. Plato regarded the soul as the essence of a person, immortal and distinct from the physical body, and he explored its nature, functions, and destiny with profound insight. One of Plato's most influential ideas is the tripartite nature of the soul, which he develops in the Republic. According to Plato, the soul is composed of three parts: reason, spirit, and appetite. Reason seeks truth and governs the other parts. Spirit drives ambition and courage, and appetite pursues physical desires and material needs. For the individual to achieve harmony and for society to function justly, these parts must be balanced, with reason assuming the guiding role. Plato likened the soul structure to a charioteer driving a chariot pulled by two horses, an allegory he presents in Phaedrus. The charioteer represents reason, tasked with controlling the two horses: the spirited horse, which is noble and obedient, and the appetitive horse, which is unruly and driven by base desires. The struggle of the charioteer to maintain control symbolizes the challenge of achieving self-mastery and living a virtuous life. Central to Plato's view of the soul is its immortality, a theme explored in dialogues such as Phaedo and Meno. Plato argued that the soul exists before birth and survives after death, transitioning between the world of forms and the physical realm. He believed that the soul's pre-existence explains our ability to recognize universal truths, such as mathematical principles and moral ideals, which are recollections of the forms the soul encountered in its prior state. Plato's arguments for the soul's immortality are both metaphysical and moral. In Phaedo, he offers several proofs, including the argument from opposites, which posits that life and death are cyclical and that the soul must endure beyond the body's demise. He also presents the argument from affinity, which suggests that the soul, being akin to the eternal and unchanging forms, must itself be eternal and indestructible. These arguments underscore Plato's belief in the soul's divine nature and its ultimate connection to the world of forms. The immortality of the soul has profound ethical implications in Plato's philosophy. He argued that the soul's eternal nature means that our actions in this life have consequences beyond our immediate existence. In the Republic, he describes the myth of Air, a story about a soldier who glimpses the afterlife and the process of reincarnation. This myth illustrates Plato's view of justice as a cosmic principle, where virtuous souls are rewarded and wicked ones punished, reinforcing the moral imperative to cultivate virtue. Education, for Plato, is not merely about acquiring knowledge, but about the soul's ascent toward enlightenment. In the Republic, he outlines the allegory of the cave, which symbolizes the soul's journey from ignorance to understanding. The philosopher's task is to guide others out of the cave, helping them recognize the forms and achieve true knowledge. This ascent requires not only intellectual effort, but also moral discipline, as the soul must overcome the distractions of the physical world to focus on higher truths. Plato's dualistic view of the soul and body has been both influential and controversial. He regarded the body as a temporary vessel that often hinders the soul's pursuit of truth. This perspective has shaped subsequent philosophical and religious traditions, particularly in emphasizing the spiritual over the material. However, critics have argued that Plato's dualism risks devaluing the physical world and the lived human experience. Despite these criticisms, Plato's conception of the soul has had a lasting impact on Western thought. It influenced later philosophers, including Aristotle, who adapted and critiqued Plato's ideas, and it became foundational in the development of Christian theology, where the immortality of the soul and its moral accountability are central tenets. Plato's insights into the soul's structure and destiny continue to inspire discussions in philosophy, psychology, and ethics. In Plato's philosophy, the soul is not merely an abstract concept, but the locus of human identity, morality, and potential. By emphasizing its immortality, complexity, and connection to the divine, Plato invites us to reflect on our inner nature and strive for a life of virtue and wisdom. His vision of the soul, with its profound implications for both individual and collective existence, remains a cornerstone of his philosophical legacy. Plato's philosophical ideas have had an enduring and transformative impact on Western thought, shaping not only the intellectual landscape of ancient Greece, but also the development of philosophy, theology, and political theory throughout history. From the early Christian church to the Renaissance, and through to modern philosophy, Plato's ideas have been interpreted, adapted, and reimagined by countless thinkers. This chapter will explore the vast influence of Plato, examining how his works have resonated through the centuries and continue to inspire contemporary debates. One of the most direct and profound influences of Plato can be seen in the work of his student, Aristotle. While Aristotle famously disagreed with Plato on several key points, most notably on the nature of reality and the role of forms, his philosophy is still deeply indebted to Plato. Aristotle's metaphysics, ethics, and political theory often began with Platonic ideas, and his concept of virtue ethics can be traced back to Plato's focus on the soul and the cultivation of virtue. Aristotle's critiques of Plato's theory of forms were instrumental in shaping the direction of subsequent metaphysical thought, but it is undeniable that the foundations laid by Plato in his dialogues set the stage for Aristotle's own intellectual developments. In addition to Aristotle, Plato's work influenced the development of early Christian thought. Early Christian thinkers, particularly Augustine of Hippo, drew heavily on Platonic ideas, particularly the notion of an eternal and immutable truth. Augustine's doctrine of divine illumination and his conception of the soul's relation to God have clear parallels to Plato's theory of forms and his belief in the soul's ultimate ascent toward a higher realm of truth and goodness. Augustine adapted Plato's dualism of body and soul to construct a Christian understanding of the soul's journey and its relationship to divine grace. In many ways, Platonic philosophy helped shape the Christian worldview, particularly in terms of its metaphysical commitment to the transcendence of God and the immortality of the soul. Plato's influence was also felt during the Renaissance, a period marked by a revival of classical thought. Humanist thinkers, including Marsilio Ficino and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, embraced Platonic ideas, particularly the notion of human potential and the relationship between the individual's soul and the divine. Ficino, in particular, worked to bring Platonic philosophy into alignment with Christian theology, arguing that the soul's ascent toward knowledge and divine wisdom was a central goal of human life. The Renaissance saw a renewed emphasis on the pursuit of wisdom and the cultivation of virtue, goals that were at the core of Plato's philosophy. The notion of a rational order to the cosmos, as well as the emphasis on education and intellectual development, found a new home in Renaissance thought, continuing Plato's legacy in the pursuit of human flourishing. In modern philosophy, Plato's influence remains evident in a variety of intellectual traditions. His idealism, with its emphasis on the transcendence of the forms and the nature of reality as separate from physical appearances, had a lasting impact on the development of German idealism, particularly in the work of Immanuel Kant and G.W.F. Hegel. Kant's distinction between the noumenal and phenomenal worlds echoes Plato's separation of the world of the forms from the material world. Kant's idea that the human mind plays an active role in structuring experience can also be seen as an extension of Plato's views on the soul's role in accessing higher knowledge. Hegel, in particular, was influenced by Plato's dialectical method and his focus on the development of knowledge. Hegel's concept of history as a rational unfolding of the world's spirit has parallels to Plato's notion of the philosopher's ascent from ignorance to truth. However, while Plato conceived of this ascent as a journey toward a transcendent realm of immutable truth, Hegel emphasized the historical and social dimensions of this process. Still, both thinkers shared a commitment to the idea that human development, whether intellectual, moral, or political, is ultimately a process of self-realization and enlightenment. In political philosophy, Plato's Republic has influenced generations of thinkers seeking to understand the nature of justice, the ideal state, and the role of the philosopher in governance. Plato's vision of a philosopher king, someone who governs with wisdom and reason, has inspired utopian thinkers and political theorists alike. Thomas More's Utopia and Sir Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan both engage with Platonic ideas about the nature of political order, though in very different ways. More, in his depiction of an ideal society, echoes Plato's desire for a just community governed by reason, while Hobbes, in his defense of absolute sovereignty, reflects Plato's recognition of the need for a strong authority to ensure social stability. Despite the many criticisms of Plato's political thought, particularly his idealism and his commitment to the philosopher king, his work has remained a key reference point in debates about governance, justice, and the role of philosophy in public life. Plato's critique of democracy, grounded in his disillusionment with Athenian politics, also resonates in contemporary discussions about the limitations of democratic systems and the challenges of achieving justice in a pluralistic society. Plato's influence is not confined to Western philosophy alone. His ideas have also been influential in the development of Islamic and Jewish thought. Philosophers such as Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Maimonides integrated Platonic ideas into their own systems, particularly in their views on the nature of the soul and its relationship to the divine. For instance, Al-Farabi's conception of the ideal city-state draws heavily on Plato's Republic, while Avicenna's metaphysics and cosmology show clear influences from Plato's theories of the soul and the forms. Similarly, Maimonides, in his writings on Jewish philosophy, incorporated Platonic ideas on the nature of God and the soul's ascent to knowledge. The lasting appeal of Plato lies not just in the specific doctrines he advanced, but in his method of philosophical inquiry. Plato's dialogues encourage active engagement with fundamental questions about reality, knowledge, and ethics. His dialectical approach invites readers to challenge assumptions, examine the nature of virtue, and reflect on the pursuit of the good life. This interactive nature of his work has allowed it to remain relevant and influential for over 2 millennia, continuously inspiring new generations of thinkers. In conclusion, Plato's contributions to Western thought extend far beyond the ancient world. His exploration of the nature of reality, the soul, and the ideal state has shaped the intellectual traditions of the Western world and continues to provide insight into contemporary debates in philosophy, politics, and ethics. Whether directly through his doctrines or indirectly through the influence of his methods and ideas, Plato's legacy remains a central pillar of philosophical inquiry, and his works continue to challenge, inspire, and provoke thought across a wide range of disciplines. Plato's legacy is both monumental and complex, touching upon nearly every aspect of Western thought and continuing to shape intellectual, ethical, and political discourse today. His influence is not confined to the world of philosophy alone, as his ideas permeate theology, education, science, and even the arts. Through his dialogues, Plato established a framework for understanding the world that still resonates in contemporary debates. The depth and breadth of his contributions make it clear why he is considered one of the most important figures in the history of Western civilization. One of the key aspects of Plato's enduring legacy is his conception of the philosopher as the seeker of truth. For Plato, philosophy was not a mere academic exercise, but a profound and transformative way of life, one that involves the pursuit of wisdom, self-knowledge, and moral integrity. His portrayal of Socrates as a gadfly who questions assumptions and challenges conventional thinking inspired generations of thinkers to view philosophy as an active, critical engagement with the world. The notion that philosophy is not simply about acquiring knowledge, but about transforming the soul, has had a lasting impact on how we approach intellectual inquiry. Central to Plato's enduring influence is his theory of forms, which continues to provoke thought about the nature of reality. The idea that there is an eternal, unchanging realm of perfect forms that stands in contrast to the impermanent physical world invites deep questions about the relationship between perception and reality. While Plato's metaphysical dualism has been critiqued over the centuries, his emphasis on the existence of objective truths and ideals remains foundational in many areas of philosophy. It has been particularly influential in the fields of metaphysics and epistemology, where thinkers continue to wrestle with the nature of universals, abstract concepts, and the possibility of objective knowledge. Plato's emphasis on the importance of reason and intellectual virtue has had profound effects on the development of ethics and moral philosophy. His concept of the good as the highest and most fundamental principle serves as a guide for moral life, influencing not only later philosophers like Aristotle, but also religious traditions, especially Christianity. His argument that the soul is immortal and that justice is intrinsically linked to a harmonious soul and a just society established an ethical framework where the pursuit of virtue and the cultivation of wisdom are paramount. Plato's notion that philosophy leads to an understanding of the good continues to shape discussions in ethics and moral philosophy, from Kantian deontology to contemporary virtue ethics. In the realm of political theory, Plato's Republic remains a critical text for those seeking to understand the relationship between justice, governance, and the role of philosophy in public life. His vision of the ideal state, where philosopher kings rule with wisdom and the citizens live according to their natural roles, raises questions about the nature of political authority, the balance of power, and the relationship between the individual and the state. While Plato's idealism has been critiqued as utopian and impractical, his insistence on the importance of justice and virtue in political leadership continues to be a touchstone for political philosophers today. His work has influenced both proponents of authoritarian governance and advocates of democratic ideals, as thinkers grapple with the balance between individual freedom and the common good. Plato's work also had a profound influence on the development of educational theory. His academy, one of the first institutions of higher learning in the Western world, set the stage for the development of formal education. Plato's educational philosophy, which emphasizes the importance of intellectual and moral development, particularly through dialectical reasoning and the pursuit of knowledge, has had a lasting impact on educational systems and theories. His belief in the transformative power of education, particularly the idea that individuals can be shaped by knowledge and wisdom, continues to inform contemporary debates about the role of education in personal and societal development. In the field of science, Plato's contributions, while not directly empirical, set the stage for the later development of scientific thought. His emphasis on mathematics as the language of the universe, seen most clearly in his Timaeus, influenced the development of scientific reasoning, particularly in the Renaissance when figures like Kepler and Galileo looked back to Plato's work for inspiration. Although Plato himself did not engage in empirical science in the modern sense, his integration of mathematical and philosophical inquiry laid a foundation for later scientific advancements. His belief in an intelligible and rational cosmos continues to inform the scientific view of the universe as something that can be understood through reason and mathematics. Beyond the confines of philosophy, Plato's influence extends into the arts, where his exploration of beauty, aesthetics, and the nature of artistic representation has shaped artistic theory for centuries. In the Republic, Plato famously critiques poetry and the visual arts, arguing that they can deceive the soul and divert attention from the pursuit of truth. Despite this skepticism towards certain forms of art, Plato's exploration of the role of art in society has prompted numerous debates on the purpose and value of art. His reflections on beauty, particularly his idea that beauty reflects the divine and leads the soul closer to the realm of the forms, continue to resonate in the fields of aesthetics and art criticism. Perhaps one of the most significant aspects of Plato's legacy is the manner in which his ideas have remained alive through the ages, continually adapted and reinterpreted by new generations of thinkers. His dialogues, with their literary and philosophical richness, have been studied and reread for centuries, never growing obsolete. Plato's ability to present complex philosophical ideas within compelling narratives ensures that his works continue to engage modern readers, philosophers, and scholars. His legacy, therefore, is not simply a matter of preserving ancient knowledge, but of continually offering new insights and challenges to contemporary thought. In conclusion, the enduring legacy of Plato lies not just in the specific ideas he advanced, but in the way his entire approach to philosophy has shaped the trajectory of Western thought. His works continue to serve as a touchstone for philosophical inquiry, moral reflection, and political theory. The questions Plato raised about justice, knowledge, the nature of reality, and the soul remain as pertinent today as they were 2 millennia ago. His impact is evident in every major intellectual tradition that followed, from medieval scholasticism to modern philosophy. Plato's quest for truth, beauty, and justice continues to inspire those who seek a deeper understanding of the world and our place within it, ensuring that his legacy will endure for generations to come.